Can we say that the theory of problem, reaction and solution would be what's going on in the United States, let's say with the Black Lives Matter? Yeah. We are talking about now divide and conquer. So George Soros put about $70 million into Black Lives Matter, which is an extremist organization, and they are playing off of each other two races, let's say in the United States. Here in Europe, they are bringing these immigrants here. Is it the reason why is this happening to actually to create that fear in the people?
Yeah, well, there's
because on the end of the day, whatever, if those two groups there or here will clash, we will ask for a police state.
Exactly. I mean, the easiest way to get a police state and other extreme situations in is to create problems to which a police state is the solution. This is what, look at every time there's a terrorist attack in Europe. The answer is more control, more surveillance, more armed police and military on the streets, and so on. Now, in my new book, Phantom Self, and in the talks like on Saturday, I quote a guy called Dr. Richard Day, and he was a Rockefeller insider. He was an executive of Planned Parenthood, which is a Rockefeller organization that started out in the eugenics movement, which the Rockefellers were big time behind. And in 1969, he stood up, no one knows why, but he did, at a meeting of pediatricians in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because he was a doctor. And he asked them to not take notes and to turn off any recording equipment, because he was going to tell them how the world was going to change, because that which he was part of was going to change it. And he came out with a series of things. It must have been a long talk, because a lot of things that he said. There was a doctor in the audience called Lawrence Donegan who did take notes. And a few, before he died in 2004, he did a series of interviews which went out on an internet site describing what Day had said in 1969. And he was describing the world now in very detailed ways, extraordinarily so.
Rockefeller was.
He was talking about the internet in 1969, which apparently was only invented through CERN in something like 1989. He was talking about smart TVs, which only came out in 2008, because Orwell was talking about smart TVs, the telescreens, in 1948, because this agenda is long, long term. And one of the things that he said was going to happen is that they were going to have mass immigration into countries because he said it's easier to break down cultures and to change society in countries where there are many people that don't have any roots, his words, or history in those countries. And when I look at the situation of migration, whenever something happens very quickly and is then everywhere, the alarm bells should go off. I mean, just as a quick aside, take fracking. Fracking came out of nowhere, and suddenly it was everywhere. People protesting all over the world about fracking. Where did that come from? And if you look at what happened, and it's all a perception deception, there was this horrific picture of a little boy dead on a beach who had died as a result of him and his family and others trying to get out of the Middle East into Greece.
That was the official version.
Yeah, that was the official version, yes. And suddenly, obviously, there was an outpouring from people that saw that picture of emotion, of compassion. Now, there's nothing easier to manipulate than genuineness that's not streetwise. And the idea is to feel the compassion, but then ask yourself, why am I being shown this now? Now let's look what happens after it. And it was immediately after that picture circulated, and there's this outrage of this outpouring rather of understandable compassion, that the real big pouring into Europe of people started. This is when Merkel opened the floodgates, not just to people fleeing wars created by the West. My response to that is yes, there is a reason why those people should be helped by those countries that created the wars. But that's not what happened. Yes, there were refugees from war, but the vast majority of people pouring into Europe on the back of that emotional outpouring triggered by that picture were young men. They weren't even families, which of course has created tremendous upheavals in places like Germany and Sweden and elsewhere. And if you remember, when this great enormous number of people started arriving at German railway stations, there were Germans on the platform clapping them in. You know why? Because the perception deception within those people, they were relating those people coming off the trains to that little boy on the beach. This is how perception deception works, and manipulating people's perceptions through emotions is the easiest gateway to perception.
They are not clapping anymore, are
They're
they?
not clapping anymore, and I said at the time, you know, they're clapping now, but they won't be clapping soon, because two things. First of all, they're different cultures. Now, you're supposed to be racist if you say that. Excuse me, that's not racist, that's absolute blatant fact. They're different cultures. And what they want to do, and this is the plan, is they want to break Europe up into subservient regions to the European Union bureaucracy under a world government, and bring an end to nation states. Because nation states have a sense of culture, they have a sense of history, and a relation to a nation state is a great resistance to having the nation state disappear. So stage one of this absolutely blatant opening the door to Europe is to dilute a sense of culture. The other thing is they want the clashes. They want the clashes because that gives you divide and rule, and that gives you not only a reason for the police state, but you, as you rightly point out, people in fear of what's happening, like civil war, demanding the police state. That's what it's about. And I would say to people all over Europe, don't see things in black and white, otherwise you're going to be played like a stringed instrument. If you look at the indigenous populations of Europe and you look at the migrants coming in, if you could see symbolically what was happening, you'd see strings attached to the migrants, you'd see strings attached to the indigenous population, and those strings would be held by the same hand. They're playing people off against each other. And it's interesting, so often over the years, the BBC, which is a kind of state-owned, controlled organization, whatever they claim, has put out so-called factional documentaries, like documentaries that are kind of supposed to be part fiction, part factual, who turned out monumentally accurate. And for instance, there was a documentary which was based on the fact that bombs had gone off in London tubes. And they had the politicians and the people reacting. That was what the documentary was about. In 2005, the London bombings known as 7/7 were an absolute mirror of what was in that documentary. And I remember, it must have been a few decades ago now, the BBC ran this documentary, which was based on vast numbers of people pouring into Europe out of the Middle East and North Africa and transforming European society and creating the clashes and the conflict that followed. So when you have people like the notorious George Soros, who not only is saying that he wants, vast numbers of people coming into Europe ongoing, or his mansions must be full then. Whenever Soros, who is a bagman for the Rothschilds, that's how he went out of Hungary and became a billionaire.
Didn't they provide him with education in the London School of Economics?
Yeah, excuse me. But it's people say, oh, he's very clever, he's a billionaire. Becoming a billionaire by playing the markets, when you know, because that which you are part of controls the markets, you know when the market's going up and the market down. Anybody can be a billionaire. Okay, the market's going to go up. Okay, I'll get into this. Market's going down. Okay, I'll get out of that.
People don't know that the game is rigged?
The game's completely rigged. So when Soros opens his mouth, this hidden hand is speaking. Not every now and again, not when there's an R in the month, all the time. So you look at Soros, you've mentioned him already in terms of Black Lives Matter and the attempt of a race war in America, and that's absolutely the case. And there was a local television station, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago in America that exposed the fact that Soros and Soros front organizations, one of them I think was called Welcome America, was trying to pour people into parts of America out of middle America, Central America, with the exact same agenda of transforming those societies into a different culture. And he's behind that going on in the United States. He's behind what's going on in Europe. And so when you look at Chancellor Merkel, I mean, she is a front person for this hidden hand down to her DNA. So this starts to explain to German people and
David,
others in Europe about why suddenly she opened the floodgates, because it's destroyed.
She surely must see now that it's not right, and she's still standing behind the decision.
Exactly that.
There are two options. She either really wants it or someone told her to do it, or she's stupid. And I don't think she's stupid.
No, she's not stupid. She's very, very calculating and not stupid. She's not got an expanded consciousness, so she wouldn't do what she's done. But intellectually, she's not stupid. And the whole point that I've been trying to get across over these years is that the front people for this hidden hand are terrified of the hidden hand, because they know what the hidden hand does when it's crossed. And therefore, she is more frightened of the hidden hand than she is of the German people. And as you rightly say, she is committing electoral suicide. But by the time that she is removed, which she almost certainly will be as a result of all this, and the election results in Germany are catastrophic for her and her party, then vast numbers of people will be in Germany and the die will be cast. And that's not a condemnation of the people coming in, although let's not, let me say this. people see the whole world in black and white. Therefore, it's all Muslims bad, all Muslims good. Muslim people that I've known and met in the Middle East and around the world are some of the kindest, gentlest, generous people I've ever come across. But to say that all Muslims are like that would be as stupid as to say all Muslims are bad and terrorists. We've got to see the shades of grey, otherwise there's no way we're going to get our heads around what's going on. And there's no doubt that there are people who call themselves Muslim, and overwhelmingly these Muslim extremists are actually not following Islam that most people are following. They're following Saudi Arabia's basically extreme Islam.
Yeah, Wahhabist.
This is why Saudi Arabia chops people's heads off, and so does ISIS, because they're expressions of the same belief system. And most of that is manufactured. They don't chop people's heads off in Syria. I mean,
David,
and many other
let me ask you this. There are over 1 million of them already in Europe. Yeah. Now they came in, no one checked them.
No, exactly.
Now, how can you tell which one is which? Which one is the terrorist? Which one is the kind one?
Well, this is the problem that has everyone cast with the same perception of who they are. But there was an undercover reporter for a French television station who went undercover with a terrorist, quote, terrorist cell in Europe. And when he came out and talked about it, he said the shocking thing was basically there was no Islam involved at all. These were just kids who were suicidal, who were on drugs, who were completely lost. And there was no mention of Islam. And they had been promised that if they, did these things, they would get paradise and all that stuff as a result of it. They were just bits of kids being manipulated. And if you go through the process, you have these people that carry out these terrorist attacks, and some actually are carried out directly by the security agencies wearing face covers and armory like has happened in America. They say this person's done that, but you don't know that, because when they did it, the only thing people saw were people in masks and with weapons. They didn't see their faces. But you've got these kids that carried it out. Then you've got the next level. You've got the leaders of these terrorist organizations. Then you've got military intelligence, like the CIA, British intelligence, and Mossad. Now, these kids here don't know that exists. And then above that, you're going deeper into
No, they don't know that it exists above them.
No. They think they're carrying out these terrorist attacks for whatever reason they are. They don't realize that because of compartmentalization, that actually they're carrying them out on behalf of the very authorities they think they're carrying them out against. Yes. This is the inversion. And so if we equate Islam as its I don't practice any religion. I think I have a phrase: religion is the greatest form of mind control ever invented. But if we cast everyone that follows Islam in a peaceful way with these kind of people who's no longer in control of their minds, then this divide and rule is going to be catastrophic in Europe. And I would say this. Let's not look at what people believe. Let's not look at what they look like. Let's look at what they do. And there's no question, it's quite blatant, that, for instance, there is a completely different dynamic and perception of women and the role of women and the subordination of women among so many of these migrants into Europe following Islam in its various forms, that this is where this great problem has occurred in places like Germany and Sweden of attacks on women. It's because the way women are seen is not in the same way that they're seen in Europe. And it's no good people saying that's racist, it's fact. I mean, you know, you look at Saudi Arabia at its most extreme. They can't drive cars, women. They can't basically go anywhere without a chaperone. You've got women in these extreme places like Pakistan who are stoned to death for being frickin' raped, right? I mean, it's absolute madness. That's the extreme. This unbelievable male domination and disrespect for women. Like, women are just slaves to be used and told what to do. Now, if some of that mentality is coming into Europe, it's not going to stop having that mentality, and we must face the fact. Again, we're into shades of grey. Are the vast majority of migrants coming into Europe abusing women? No, they're not, and they never would. Are some of them doing it? Yes, they are. And instead of saying we can't talk about that, we must think it's all like that, it's not. And that this is the point. What these people are doing is creating the very thing that they say they don't want to happen, and that is a way of looking at what's happening with a frustration that you can't articulate how you feel about it.
Why?
Because of political correctness, you're a racist.
Now, hold on.
But
this racist card has been used everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, in Central Europe, the media, they are trying to use it.
Yeah.
To a certain way, it's working.
Yeah.
But we don't have a chip on our shoulders. See, we haven't gone outside of our countries. We didn't invade and kill people. We didn't rob them from their natural resources.
Right.
So, if someone is a bad person or anything else, I don't care whether it's blue, black, or, you know,
Exactly.
you're a prick, you're a prick.
Exactly.
That's it. Yeah. So here the racist card doesn't really fly, but in Western Europe, it's a very often used, and actually it works really well on people, especially on white people. Why would it work on them? You know, you didn't go to Africa and kill, you know, black people, or you didn't enslave them. Why would you?
Yeah, the British Empire did.
Yeah, but it wasn't you.
The most appalling empire in the history of the world.
David, but it wasn't you.
No.
You know, it's like me hating a 20-year-old German girl because they were here and they killed millions of us. I'm not crazy. Why would I hate her?
Yeah.
So why does it work on people in Western Europe and in the United States?
Well, I think there's two things. First of all, you have what are called progressives. This is a word that's come out of America. Basically,
neo-Marxists.
Progressives that support people like Bernie Sanders, to an extent, the very small part of them relate to the Democratic Party in general. Like Clinton, a lot of the progressives will be voting for Clinton. A lot of the progressives won't because of what happened to Bernie Sanders. And then this word progressive is actually being used for the same sort of people, the Greens and the left in politics in Britain as well. So you have the progressives, and they their heart has been transported from here to here, right? It's on their frickin' sleeve. Look at me, how pure I am. And therefore, you can't say anything about anyone who basically isn't white, because only white people are racist, of course. That's the way it seems to go. Racism is a state of mind, not a state of color. So they jump on anybody through political correctness and this reflex action, you're racist. And then you've got the others that actually would like to articulate how they feel, but are frightened of being labeled racist and having what they call now a Twitter storm against, you know, we had a guy, a British actor, who was being interviewed in America, and he was being interviewed and complaining at racism and discrimination against black actors in Hollywood, right? But because he used the word coloured instead of black, Twitter storm, right? And he's coming out and but basically on his knees. Oh, forgive me. I didn't
What's
mean
wrong
any,
with color?
Didn't mean any offense. He's a white guy. I didn't mean any offense. And it's like, hold on. I mean, if somebody did that to me, I would post a finger on Twitter and say, and go and have a cup of tea and say, I'll leave you to it, because the guy wasn't coming from a point of view of racism. He just used a word. But in a way of defending the fact that there was discrimination against black people, black actors in Hollywood. It's madness, but because people fear that reaction.
But David, what you are saying, it's not or whatever you're describing, it's not a political correctness, it's censorship.
Well, yeah, but political correctness has been created personally by the social engineering organizations, going back to things like the Frankfurt School, which was the Rothschild School, to get the population to censor each other. That's what political correctness is
or
about.
Or themselves, auto-censorship.
It's not about political correctness. I go into this on Saturday. It's not about protecting people and not upsetting people. These guys couldn't give a damn whether people are upset or not. It's about using that as an excuse to get the population to censor itself, to get the herd to censor the herd. And I won't do that. I'll say what I think, and if people don't like it, they can do the other thing. That's fine by me. But so this is what it's about, and this is why people are frightened to speak out. And you see, what happens then is when people have no vehicle to just articulate how they feel about seeing their societies changed in various ways, they get more and more frustrated, and they get more and more, if you like, often extreme because of that frustration. If we had a debate, if we could see the shades of grey, if we could be fricking adult and say, hold on a minute, first of all, let's look at this migration. Let's forget Muslims, let's forget colour, let's forget everything. Let's look at numbers. If you have increasing unlimited numbers of people, no matter where their background comes from, coming into a specific area, you are going to have a situation, which is happening, where the services, the housing, everything the health services cannot cope. Therefore, on sheer numbers, we have to have an adult debate about how many numbers can be in certain areas without the whole of that society.
Otherwise, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, exactly. What we can't have, well, I can, bugger it, but we can't in general have that debate openly because of the heart on the sleeves progressives, brackets, censors, saying you're racist if you want that debate, even on sheer numbers. Then we have a situation where there are cultural differences, and we have to acknowledge that. Someone coming in from a Muslim country where they've been Muslim all their lives, and that the whole country has been run on Muslim grounds with Muslim laws, coming into a country where that's not happening, there is a cultural difference there. Hello, intelligent life calling planet Earth, and we have to address that. We have to look at that. We have to be adult. We have to see the shades of grey and not the black and white. And then we have to also accept that while the vast majority of Muslims, and as I've said many times, the Muslims that I've met over the years are overwhelmingly some of the nicest, genuine, most generous people I've ever met. But some are not. And thus we have to address that which is not, while not branding everyone else with that which is not. But we can't have that debate, because if you want to talk about the abuse of women by people who have contempt for women, then that's racist as well. So what happens is the people that are pushing that agenda of you're a racist, shut up, are actually creating the very frustration and the very sense of there's nothing I can do, that brings out the more extreme reaction.
All right, so these procs, wouldn't they listen to an argument that this is not actually a race problem, it's a cultural problem?
Yeah, it's not about race. I mean, anyone that's looked at my work knows where I'm coming from. I say that what we are is awareness, a state of being aware. We don't have form in our ultimate state. We are sense of awareness. And these vehicles are vehicles to allow our awareness to experience certain realities. Because, we don't want to get deep into this, but we think we're in a world. We're not. We're in a frequency band. The frequency band that we can decode into a visual reality is so tiny, it's laughable. Therefore, this world is just a place for our awareness to experience. And that awareness, that point of attention, of that same awareness, this is where I'm coming from, is experiencing through Muslim people, it's experiencing through black people, it's experiencing through Asian people, experiencing through middle class white people. And this association with what my body is relates to what I am, has created this situation where everyone sees everyone as apart from everyone else, and therefore the division lines of potential divide and rule are endless for this hidden hand to manipulate. So I am the ultimate non-racist in the sense that I'm saying we're all the same consciousness and the forms are only vehicles for experience. Thus, it's like, I've used this analogy. Racism is like two spacemen on the moon fighting over the fact that one spaceman's spacesuit was made by this company and is this color, and this spaceman's spacesuit was made by this company and is another color. I mean, we'd say, at Houston, we got a problem. These two spacemen on the moon have gone crazy. They're fighting over their different spacesuits. Well, that's what racism is. So where I'm coming from is absolutely that racism is the ultimate confirmation of a complete misunderstanding of reality and life itself. However, we still got to look at the fact that in the world that we're experiencing, there are perceptual differences and cultural differences which have to be addressed. And you can't just censor the fact, which is happening around Europe, that women are being abused by people with some people, not the vast majority, some people with a different relationship to women and perception of women and their place in society than we have normally in Europe. We've got to address these things. And what's really unbelievable is that the feminist organizations that scream feminism all the time, oh, abuse of women, oh, women being put down. Okay, over here. What about what's happening in Saudi Arabia, right, to women? Oh, well, I don't know, we've got a meeting, I've never looked. Okay, what about the women that are being attacked sexually, etc., in places like Germany and Sweden? Oh no, can't talk about that, it's politically incorrect.
I've got a better one for you.
It's crazy.
Listen, about a month ago in Bratislava in Slovakia, there was this pride march, the homosexuals, gay people, and they were marching with a banner which said, "Rainbow against Islamophobia." I've got that picture, it will be on the video. You look at it and you go like, are you people crazy? What's wrong with those people? Why, they are throwing them off the roofs.
Yeah.
There are,
Because we are in a world that is constantly manipulated to see everything in black and white terms. And I mean, not just, I don't mean that racially, I mean symbolically. There are no shades of grey. And if you look at the world and you look at history, the truth is always in the shades of grey. It's never in the black and white. And so while you've got people who are genuinely racist by reflex action, and I've seen some members of the so-called master race who claim to be the master race, and if they're the master race, well, I'd rather not be, thank you very much. But on the other side, you've got this progressive movement, which would basically place itself out through much of the media, like MSNBC and CNN and such like in America, for instance, but through other media as well. That is the other extreme that will not allow genuine debate and genuine interaction to take place, to look at things that are happening. And so while that will say that genuinely racial view of the world, racist view of the world is extreme, well, extremes have polarities. And the other polarity of this situation is that which calls itself progressive. The biggest problem with progressives, they're not progressive, and they're certainly not informed. And therefore, you've got two extremes shouting at each other, and in the middle are a vast number of people who just want a debate about what they're concerned about, and to have what's actually happening circulated in the media instead of covered up and suppressed. And so, we have a situation where there are, for instance, women being abused and attacked, and therefore we have to address that. We have to openly discuss it and say, look, how do we stop this? Because by ignoring it because of political correctness, it's just going to go on, and it needs to be addressed. But at the same time, let's take that